Election season in the United States has also raised questions about the country's commitment to a democratic future and how the results will impact issues here in Canada. Let's bring in Professor Rob Goodman with more on this. For Canadians who may be unaware of American politics, what does the outcome mean tonight in terms of power in Washington, D.C.?
Well, every 2 years, control of the entire House of Representatives is up for grabs, along with 1/3 of the Senate seats. So although Americans aren't electing the president in this midterm election, the outcome's really going to determine whether President Biden's going to be able to govern and legislate for the next 2 years until the presidential election, or whether he's going to be faced with a really hostile Republican Congress.
Professor Goodman, depending on the balance of power tonight, how might there be a shift between Washington and Ottawa? What should Canadians prepare for?
I think the big issue here is that the Republican Party is continuing its development into an authoritarian party, a party that denies the outcomes of democratic elections and that does everything in its power to sabotage them and to suppress voter participation in those elections, both on the state and the federal level. So I think the main development that's going to affect U.S.-Canadian relations is the dawning possibility that Canada is going to have to live with a neighbor that is really well into the throes of democratic erosion. And I don't think a lot of Canadian members of the public or politicians, fully woken up to the possibility that their neighbor is an eroding democracy.
And you have a book coming out in August titled Not Here: Why American Democracy is Eroding and How Canada Can Protect Itself. Why do you believe there's been an erosion of democracy south of the border, and what have the midterms shown you?
I think white nationalism and Christian nationalism are forces on the rise in American politics. I think they've been factors in American politics, of course, for many generations. And there have been periods in which they've been on the downslide, and there have been periods in which they've been more likely to be dominant. And I think this is a period that we've seen as America is going through demographic changes in a time of economic instability. I think these factors combine, to produce a significant minority of the population in America that isn't happy with the outcomes of democratic elections, that would much rather dominate and prevent the possibility that elections could result in meaningful changes of government. And I think at the same time, although that's been a rising tendency in the Republican Party, I think it's fair to criticize the Democratic Party for not really making a convincing or effective case for why it matters that democracy is at stake in elections going forward.
Yes, and a recent Associated Press poll found the majority of Americans are actually unhappy with the Biden administration.
Well, yeah, I think it's true that the Biden administration is facing some significant headwinds that are related to issues like inflation and the cost of living. But I think an even more significant headwind that it's facing is the fact that, in general, as a rule of thumb in American midterm elections, the party that holds the presidency tends to do really badly. I think the only exception to that comes to mind in recent history is 2002, which was, of course, affected by the events of 9/11 just prior to the election. So I think if this election is anything like previous trends, it's going to be bad for the president's party. I think we're talking about degrees of bad at this point for the president's party. But I think I think the concern here is not just that the president's party is going to do badly, but the party that's going to do successfully out of this usual trend is a party that is increasingly unwilling to accept the outcomes of elections it doesn't win.
And Trump has made it clear he has something big to announce next week, suggesting he'll launch his 2024 presidential campaign. So we'll see how all of that pans out. Thank you, Professor Goodman, for your time tonight.
Thanks so much.